That's great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Walling. I really appreciate those kind words. And it's an honor to be with you today. I appreciate you taking the time to come. If you go back to when I was running for office, I had two main goals to talk about the reinvention of Michigan: the need for more and better jobs and a bright future for our kids. And we've stayed committed and true to that. But when you look at how you achieve those things, it's a much bigger puzzle. It's not just those two topics. We need to look at the bigger picture of other things that need to be part of that solution. And when you look at it, there are many elements to that. Good communications is one. And as a practical matter, it gets to having an entire urban strategy. We have that in process. We're talking about transit issues across the state. We're talking about housing issues, many other topics. But one of the very fundamental issues is public safety. It gets down to the basics of quality of life. If you can't feel safe in your community, if you can't feel comfortable having your kids go to school or go to the grocery store, it's hard to say you can build on those other platforms. And when we looked at how Michigan was doing, we're not doing well enough on public safety. We need to step it up, and we need to do something about it. The solution is not just state government. The solution is just not government. It's about all Michiganders coming together to solve these issues. And that's why I'm proud to say the way we're operating this methodology, it's about collaboration. It's about government coming together at all levels. It's about government working with the not-for-profit sector, working with the private sector, having us all understand we have a role to play in creating great quality of life and good public safety for one another. And we are on that path. And so that's the exciting part, is we know the path we have to go on. Now let's just make sure we get it done. And as part of that, I'm happy to announce I am throwing out some new terms, because I think we do need to look at things in an innovative new way of doing things. So one of the first concepts I want to share with you is a concept of smart justice. And again, everyone out here in this group are smart people, so don't take it that way. But what is smart justice? Smart justice has three key elements. First, it's about taking a comprehensive approach to public safety. It's about understanding that it includes law enforcement, it includes the entire criminal justice system, and it includes crime prevention. It's a whole cycle of solutions that need to go together. Just one step alone is not good enough. The second one is it needs to be data-driven. And that should be no surprise coming from me, is we need to measure results. We need dashboards, and we have a dashboard for public safety now. And it's about using data to help drive behavior, to say, let's go where we can make the greatest difference. And that gets to the third element, is let's take a comprehensive approach, let's use data, and let's drive to where the areas of greatest need are, where we can make the biggest difference and where it's most important to make that difference. And that's part of the focus today, is to announce a partnership that we're calling the Secure Cities Partnership. To say we really need to focus in on 4 communities as the starting point for this, while at the same time taking these ideas all across Michigan to help all our citizens. But we need a focused effort. We have 4 cities that are among the top 10 most violent in the United States. To me, that's absolutely unacceptable. I don't know how a Michigander anywhere can say that's acceptable. We need to do something about it. And that's part of the commitment today, is to say the Secure Cities Partnership will focus in on these 4 communities, while at the same time being a model and a pilot for many of the things that we can do many other places in Michigan. And we won't discourage any community from participating or taking those ideas and doing them in their own community anytime they want. We actually encourage that. So it's about winning together. So let me get started by giving you some background. I've got some diagrams and charts I'd like to show you. First of all, a public safety dashboard. In many respects, Michigan as a state is doing okay relative to the rest of the United States. If you look at our statistics on crime, we're actually about the national average. Now, that's not good enough. We need to improve on that. But we're holding strong there, and then I'll show you how it translates into our cities, though. If you look at this chart, this is a listing of the top 100 cities, kind of in a distribution curve. And it shows the Michigan cities on this list. We actually have 8 overall. If you look at the violent crimes per 100,000, it shows the Michigan average, which is basically close to the national average, slightly under 500 per 100,000. That would be way down here. We have 4 communities, 2 of which are over 2,000 per 100,000, 2 of which are just under 2,000 per 100,000. Think about that. That's almost 4 times as many violent crimes. We have a number of other cities that are about half or about double that rate of the national average and the U.S. average. That's not a good answer either. So we have the data to tell us where we need to focus. We have the data to say we're doing okay, but we're not doing well. Let's do something about it. And so we really get to that point. We have a lot of other stats here that I'll come back to at various points to highlight, but again, here's a dashboard that we can show our measurements, what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, and this is the chart we want to see all these orange bars disappear on. There's something to shoot for, folks. Now, just to take it to the next level, before I get into all the programs we have, is to show you more data. And typically, the media focuses on the murder rate. So I did a chart for that, just to show you what those numbers look like. Here's the U.S. and national average. Again, we're neck and neck with the national average. But if you look at these 4 communities, it's dramatically higher. And actually, there's been some strong improvement in some communities. Saginaw, for example, has done well on their murder rate. One thing, though, you'll see overall they haven't done as well because they have a big issue with aggravated assaults. Now, this is the chart for violent crime overall. And you can see the gap. This is why we need to do something. I can talk about a lot of words, but when you look at this chart, it tells you what we need to do, doesn't it? So let's do something about that. Now, let me start talking about what we're going to do about it. First of all, I mentioned smart justice, and I mentioned the 3 components of smart justice in terms of the areas. Let me start with law enforcement. Again, it's about partnership at all levels. So first I want to talk about local law enforcement. We need to make more investment there. We know that. And so already in this year's budget that we presented, we talked about putting dollars aside for an innovation fund for local communities to allow communities to apply for one-time funding to come up with creative ideas for better service or cost savings to be successful. We put aside $25 million this year, for this next year's budget, I should say. We're going to ask the legislature to set aside 10 of that $25 million for a priority on public safety. So we encourage every community member here to say, if you come up with innovative ideas with your surrounding communities, with other jurisdictions, to say, how can you make a difference and apply for those funds? We want to give you those dollars so you can go make a difference. The next step is more resources at the state level. And one reason I wanted to focus in on the state level is we have this whole series of cities, and we need to have flexibility to work in all those cities and to put resources where the greatest need is and to support the local resources. So I'm proud to say one of the things we're going to do is we're going to put more state troopers on the job. We're going to have 2 trooper schools. That's a tongue twister for me. But hopefully we hope to graduate about 180 troopers over the next few months. And I'm proud to say one of the things that really enabled that to happen is I want to send a shout out to the troopers themselves. We just entered into a new collective bargaining agreement that was just ratified, where the state police are stepping forward to understand we're doing this in teamwork, and I appreciate their agreement, their changes they're making to make them an organization for the long term in terms of being even more effective and even higher quality. So I want to say thank you to the Troopers Association for their work. So more troopers. But that doesn't stop there. I want to thank the federal government We've had good cooperation from both the FBI in Michigan and the U.S. Attorney's Office. They are both part of this partnership to put more resources on these communities and focus in on partnering on dealing with crime there. And that's a key element. So as you can see, this is about local, state, federal resources, all working together in teamwork. That's the attitude we need. So there are many other pieces, and I'll go through some of these fairly quickly because you'd be here for lunch. There's actually 34 different initiatives. I've just mentioned 3. But the next tier of things that we're including in this is more for the forensics labs. Because if you look at one of the stats we have up here, is one of the challenges for law enforcement is getting the information they need. We have too long a backlog in our crime labs. So we're at 57 days. We need to get that down. So one of the things we're doing that we put in this budget request already for next year is 20 more scientists for the crime labs. That will make a big difference. But secondly, it's more than just the scientists. We're actually going to hold an academy for these jurisdictions in particular, but on how to do evidence collection, about how to better partner between the crime lab scientists and law enforcement, and coming up with better methods to make sure we're collecting the right evidence the right way and spending the time on what needs to go fastest through this process. So there's a good improvement there. Continuing down that list is we want to help on the parolee front. We have too many parolees that are unfortunately getting in trouble again. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to embed parole officers in each one of these 4 police departments. So they can be there right day to day to be a partner in working together on dealing with issues with parolees, and hopefully working in a session to help parolees be successful so they don't come back in the system. Beyond that, getting more into corrections, it is time to reopen the Flint jail. And that's something we're putting resources in the budget. And we have additional dollars for that, plus additional enhancements for corrections for both jail space and for the correction systems itself to deal with the fugitives that are out there. More resources for prosecutors, because again, we need to look at the whole cycle. So in our budget request, we have $900,000 in incremental dollars for additional resources for the Attorney General to work with local prosecutors on prosecuting crime. And I appreciate the Attorney General being part of this whole process. So it's about teamwork in that regard. So one other group I want to mention too, and I want to give a shout out to them for their work already, but we're asking them to do more, is a group called CLEAR, which is our Council on Law Enforcement and Reinvention. It was a group we created when I first came to office, and it's really a group of local law enforcement people working with prosecutors, working with the court system, working with state resources to come up with ideas to collaborate together to have us be even more successful. And they're one of the groups that gave us the good recommendation about what to do with the crime labs. I've charged them with a series of other ideas to come back with recommendations this summertime and through the fall on other improvements we can make. So I think that's critically important. One of the areas I'm going to ask them to look at is next generation 911, for example. How can we take 911 to literally, if you think about our world today, how could you transmit over the longer term even video that people now have with their cell phones and send that in so we can have more ability to track crime, know where crime's happening, and respond better. CLEAR has been so successful, though, I actually want to create a second group that would complement them. And it's to take the CLEAR concept and to do it with our fire protection resources and our first responders in terms of EMS. So I think that's an important effort to say, let's do more because arson is too much a problem, both in terms of the law enforcement piece, but also the fire protection piece. And if there's more we can do with first responders with EMS, that's an important asset. So we're going to create a CLEAR-like organization to look at that. So we have a number of good efforts on the law enforcement front that I believe will really make a difference. The second one is criminal justice reform. We need to do better there. And if you look at criminal justice reform, one of the things, and I want to thank the Supreme Court and SCALE, the Supreme Court Administrative Office, and a number of people in the judicial system, a number of judges for cooperating and being part of this, is we're going to focus on 2 things in particular. One, mental health courts. They're being piloted already, but we want to establish mental health courts in these 4 cities and continue their funding. In many cases, we have people with mental health issues that are going into the correction system that could be helped and diverted to treatment programs medical programs where they could be successful and go out and hold a job and be great members of our community instead of getting in our correction system. The second one is more drug court funding and to enhance those programs. So, got a good response on that one. And part of it is not, we have had drug courts, but it's been more limited funding. This is essentially to say we're going to look at funding on a per-person model going through the system to make sure we can follow through and deal with their substance abuse problems and hopefully, again, keep them out of the criminal justice system in terms of corrections. Now, tying into drug courts, drugs are one of our greatest challenges. So I'm going to ask for some other legislation in a couple ways. One is legislation helping with putting drugs on the emergency list to say they're illegal drugs. The rate of pace of innovation in drugs is going so quickly, the legislature cannot keep up with new drugs being created. And we need to do a better job of that. So we're going to ask for legislation where the Department of Community Health, the director, can work with law enforcement to designate certain substances as illegal drugs, and then we can do law enforcement while we go through the regular process of putting them through legislation on the list. Because we had a recent case of a drug called K2, one of the more recent ones, that as soon as they started enforcing it, they did a recompounding of it, and basically they're out again with another drug. So we need to enhance that system. One other area, though, that we're going to focus on in particular, and I need support from, again, the broad community, and we are getting broad support, is with prescription drugs. One of the greatest challenges and problems we have is abuse of prescription drugs. And I'm proud to say the Michigan Medical Association and the Michigan pharmacists are part of this collaboration to say, let's do more with the Michigan Automated Prescription System. So I'd encourage any healthcare professionals to say, how do we get our doctors to all go online, to really move away from paper scripts? Because if we have an automated system that we can do analysis on, that can be a great tool in dealing with one of the greatest challenges we have, which is this prescription drug problem. So I encourage you to pass that back on to all your healthcare professionals. Or when you go get a prescription, say, can't you do it online instead of writing it out? So there's a great opportunity there, because I'll show you the stat. We actually have this. It's important enough we put it on our dashboard. We're only at about 35% of people using the system. That number should be 100%, and if it was 100%, I can tell you with confidence that could make a big impact on prescription drug abuse in our state in terms of letting law enforcement know what's right and what's wrong and how to go get the people causing the problem. So that's a big issue. Beyond that, though, we have other things to include. We want to do a number of things for different groups of victims to, again, better deal with the crimes they face, but also address their issues. And one area is we've had a board for some time on domestic violence. I'm actually going to issue an executive order to put sexual assault also as part of the domestic violence board. Because if you look at the data, quite often, someone that's involved with sexual assault has already been involved in domestic violence or vice versa. And there's an area for major improvement there. One of the other things that they're going to be tasked with is updating the sexual assault kit. That goes back about 20 years, and I think it's time, based on science, to revise that kit. So they're going to be looking at that. They're also going to be working on training. They got a grant from the federal government to actually work with a number of prosecutors and a number of communities to do more education on sexual assault and domestic violence. So that's an important area of additional emphasis we can make. Senior protection. If you look at one of the fastest growing areas of crime and difficulties in our state are with our elder population. And we need better protections there. There's actually some bills already going through the legislature that I'm encouraging them to pass that would provide us additional resources to protect our seniors. Tying into that is human trafficking. The whole issue, that gets to many young people in particular, kids. We can do a better job on human trafficking. And the last area we're going to focus in on is organized retail crime. And this was one I wasn't really aware of until we started digging into this issue, and I need to thank our law enforcement people for bringing me up to date. Literally, we have organized crime doing shoplifting, but not shoplifting in the context you and I would ever know it. These are not kids going in to take one item. These are organized groups going in, literally cleaning the shelves off of retailers and walking out with merchandise. And they're doing this blatantly. And we need to do something about that. So it's to focus in on that because you can see where those dollars would end up going, to drugs or other issues. So that's an important element, is to deal with the organized crime element that's taking place. So we have many initiatives under criminal justice reform. One thing I can tell you is that's not the only things we're working on. We have a number in the pipeline that will be rolling out as things happen. For example, I've asked the Department of Community Health to do a lot of work on the entire mental health system, not just the mental health courts, because I think there's good opportunity there to do enhancements that will help things even more. Now, I want to turn to crime prevention, because the best answer to crime is never have it happen, right? And we need to devote resources there. Again, smart justice, not just one element, but a comprehensive solution. So one of the first things we're going to do is I'm announcing a community ventures program that will be led by the MEDC. Mike Finney's with us today. And the goal there is to work with community groups, local groups, for-profit, not-for-profit, in particularly these 4 communities to say, how do we help the structurally unemployed have an opportunity for a job and a career? That gets overlooked too often. We talk about unemployment, but we don't focus in on the structurally unemployed, the people that have been unemployed for years and years, and try to find the people that really want that opportunity and have them be successful. And so we've set aside $15 million in our budget request for this program. And I can tell you, working with the MEDC and Mike, the criteria has been, this is not a make-work project. This is not about a short-term employment opportunity. I said, this is to build sustainable organizations that will employ people. I said, the goal, and again, they can be not-for-profit, is to have it so at least whatever they do makes $1. So they can say they're going to be there year after year employing people. And then we can add training resources on top so it's not a dead-end job, but on a career path to long-term success. We need to do that. To go with that is we need to help our kids. So we set aside $5 million to help at-risk youth, particularly focused on these 4 communities. We put it in the Department of Natural Resources budget for them to partner with recreation programs in these cities, school programs in these cities, and other programs to show these kids that there's a career opportunity out there, or what a career path might be, or to help find them good things to keep them occupied in the summer where they can feel good and keep good self-esteem going, because that's one of the keys to success. So we're going to devote resources there. Now, we're not stopping with those 2. A couple other things I'm asking for, and it varies by community how big a need this is, but we're going to have something on strong, secure cities, which gets to the property ownership in some of these cities. There's far too much velocity of abandoned lots, empty lots going on in a number of these communities. So one of the things I'm going to ask for legislation that really says if someone wants to buy a parcel up for sale on a tax auction, if they're an owner of a blighted property that's been cited, if they haven't paid their property taxes, they would be ineligible to buy that parcel of property. We need to break that cycle. The other thing is we've got some resources, $3 million of resources through the Michigan Land Bank that we're going to work hard on clearing title on several thousand parcels of property so they can be sold to people that will actually rehabilitate these properties and put them back into productive use, and to focus in on that. So I believe that's critically important. Now, since I'm talking about the communities beyond just law enforcement, I also want to talk about truancy, the schools. We have far too much truancy in our state, where kids are not showing up for school. And it's interesting, I didn't recognize this, but really the laws in Michigan are geared to dealing with 16 to 18-year-olds saying you have to show up for school. We don't have anything really to say, if you're 8 years old, you need to show up for school. How dumb is that? We need to do something about that. So we're going to talk about changing the truancy laws to deal with all kids that should be in school. And to help support that, on the proactive side, I'm asking the Department of Human Services to look to say, and they're already piloting this in some places, but to significantly increase this, is to say, how can we get our people out of their traditional offices, whether they're in a state office, a county office, a city office, And let's base them out of the schools or other parts right in the community so they can meet with people right where they live and make it easy for people to figure out how we can work with people that need help and give them better customer service. As part of that, though, we're also going to step up and start pilot programs to say, if you're on assistance, you need to do something to make sure your kids show up for school. And we're going to look at the issue if their kids are not showing up for school, we will look at what we need to do with their assistance to encourage them to get those kids to show up, or how we can help them get those kids to get in school. One of the last things, but not least, because it gets back to this issue of recidivism, of people coming back into the system. And this is crime prevention. You could argue it's criminal justice, but we put it in crime prevention, is actually enhancing our prisoner reentry programs. We have seen some progress over what we used to see. This number that's 31.5 actually used to be in the 40s. So it has improved, but it's not good enough. And again, these are people that have served their time. So I want to thank Director Hines for being proactive about coming up with ideas about how to enhance prisoner reentry in a more thoughtful way, take it to the next level, because there has been good work done. But one of the problems we had is quite often we didn't start prisoner reentry programs until almost 3 months or so before they were getting out. The point is, and Director Hines is focused on this, how do we start looking at that issue the day they go in? We should be focusing on how do we do prisoner reentry from the time someone enters the system, not the last month or two before they get out. Because I believe that can make a big difference in changing these numbers. So if you look at all these things, and there are many more, I've just given you the highlights. Actually, we have a whole chart here to give you some of the highlights of timeline. I hope people can stop for a minute and say, this is a hard problem. But it's a problem that's got to get solved. If you look at this chart or that chart, pick your chart. It doesn't take anyone long to say, this just doesn't work. And our citizens deserve better. And the good part is as we were building this message, and we talked to the 4 communities in particular, the leadership, Mayor Walling, people in the community, the chief here in Flint, and the surrounding communities, the chief in Detroit. Everybody wants to work together. And we have to make sure that we keep that philosophy going. Because it's not going to be one level of government, it's not going to be one department solving all this. These are hard problems, but I can tell you that personally I'm committed to saying this is not a one-year flash or a short-term answer. This is something we're making a significant commitment of resources to, of really hardworking, great people to say we need to do this for several years. And some of these things in perpetuity to make sure we're doing a better job to keep our citizens safe. That's exciting. We are getting started, and these will be rolling out, and this is not the end of the line, folks. But we are going to measure everything we roll out. That's smart justice too. This cannot be another one of those series of programs where someone stands up and talks a good game and nothing happens. So that's where you're stuck with the old account that likes charts and measures to show we're doing it and getting it done. Because that's the approach we need to take. And I hope as we do this, this gives us the focus point to say it's law enforcement, it's criminal justice, it's crime prevention, and how that can spread to say it's education, it's housing, it's transit, it's jobs, and a future for all our kids. Thank you. Thank you. I think we got some time for some questions. I think we got a couple mics here, so if anybody has any questions. One thing I do know today is I'm in the safest place in the state of Michigan right now.
Yes, Mr. Governor. First of all, I would like to say I I am impressed by the plan, but I do see an area that really needs to be addressed. And kids are getting put out of school almost every day. I mean, expelled, and it's something that boards do to protect the safety of the other children. I think that there should be some kind of intervention instead of putting them on the streets, because we're adding fuel to the fire that's out there now. So I was wondering, is there anything in that plan that can help these troubled youth that are getting kicked out? Instead of them hitting the streets, could they go to some kind of diversion center or something instead of putting them on the streets?
No, that's a great question, and that's something we probably could use more help on, to be open with you. That's not specifically addressed here. There are a couple pieces that overlap that could help with this, but the two pieces I would tell you that relate to it, but it's not good enough. So I love that kind of question, because it highlights something we should do more on, is we actually have the $5 million set aside for at-risk youth programs. And I also asked the CLEAR group, which is broad-based law enforcement through the whole system, to work with neighborhood groups, to say, are there neighborhood solutions that could work in terms of working right in the community? Because in many cases, to be blunt, the answers don't always come from the governor on down. The best answer is people in the community know what to do. We just need to be good listeners. So that's one of those connection points between the funding model and asking CLEAR to work on that. We'll try to get you connected to see if there's some things we can talk about there.
Good morning, Governor, and I'd just like to say thank you very much for trying to do something. In the past, we really haven't had that, and it's refreshing to see you and your staff and other members trying to work to help public safety, because we do need that. I'm Chief Dan McCaw from Waterford, and our jurisdiction is right next to Pontiac, as you well know. And some of the things we've done in Waterford is exactly what you've asked us to do. We've coordinated some of our training, some of our bureaus with our other municipalities, and we've now serviced the city of Pontiac for fire service and city of Lake Angeles. So we're doing all the things that the legislator and yourself is asking. My question, Governor, is I'd like you to think, or maybe a statement, think about the jurisdictions that are close to Detroit, Saginaw, Pontiac, Flint, because really we're partners with the city of Flint. We're partners with the city of Pontiac, because a lot of things we do together. We train together, we work together, we rely on one another. So when you're looking at those funds, I guess I would ask you and your staff to please look at the surrounding neighbors, because really, for example, Waterford, we've lost half of our police department over the last several years. So once again, we neighbor them, we need help too, so please take a look at that, consider that, because when the city of Pontiac or the city of Flint needs help, they get it from those jurisdictions that are right around there, because it affects us. Just because they're in Pontiac doesn't mean it doesn't happen in Waterford. Recently we had a shooting that affected 5 people that were shot, and those participants came from Pontiac. So we're in partners with them, so I would ask you and your staff and those legislators to just think about those neighboring cities, because we're really part of Pontiac, we're part of Detroit, we're part of Saginaw, we're part of Flint. Thank
Sure,
you.
Chief. I appreciate that, and I really appreciate the work that your township's done with the city of Pontiac. I mean, the fire agreements and different things have been great. What I can tell you is that first pot I talked about, the $10 million of public safety dollars, are open to any community. And the best way to probably be one of the people that would win those dollars, because it's based on merit, would be a community like yours with one of these communities partnering together. That actually one of the awards I believe we gave was to Waterford Township with Pontiac to help with the fire situation. So those are right in line with the kind of opportunities we think. And we even have $25 million set aside. We're only asking for a priority on 10. But I can tell you, if the best projects go beyond the 10 for public safety, there's no reason they couldn't win more than 10. Again, that's true. We really encourage that innovative attitude that you have when you got up and talked about things. We want to encourage innovation, because we can take the lessons of what's working well that you're doing and share them with other communities, and then we can do them again. So one thing I really like about this model of this fund is it really encourages innovation in government and shows our citizens we can be creative and do things a new way. So I appreciate your comments.
Thank you again, Governor, for being here in the best city in Michigan and the best county out of 83.
That's what we like. We like that marketing message. Now, you should learn from this. We got to be bragging about Michigan more. So let's speak up about our communities.
I'm Pastor Latrell Holmes, and I have a concern as it relates to the faith community and to business and property theft as it relates to the rash of theft of non-ferrous metals that is going on not only here in the community of Flint, but I'm sure throughout the state of Michigan. I know that in 2008 there was a effort to legislate stronger penalties against the salvage yards. But is that issue being looked at now? And I do have a suggestion that if we put a moratorium on the payouts when non-ferrous metals is turned in at the salvage yard, to maybe make them wait about 30 days before they get their little $30 after causing us a $100,000 insurance bill, that might be a deterrent there. And the second is the issue as it relates to the truancy, the dollars related to mentoring programs to help as a diversion, not only with the reentry program of prisoners, but the deterrent of actually getting people detained in our prisons throughout the state.
Yeah, well, Pastor, thanks for your question, because again, that's where between the youth program and the jobs program, we want to partner with the faith-based communities in these areas too, to find out different areas to deal with truancy and different things. I mean, it's all one cycle. The school, the faith-based community, the business community in those areas are kind of that circle you want to base on to build a strong neighborhood and a strong community. So that's right. On your first point, though, we're on that one. To put it in context, we had 34 items in this. This would have been number 35, literally, is the scrap metal issue. But I had my staff already going crazy. I drive them nuts, pushing for new ideas already. So I had to draw the line somewhere, but I can tell you we actually had significant discussions on scrap metal this week. Because I think it's nuts what's going on. That literally there are cases where some of our communities, whole sections of fencing are disappearing. And street lights. The street lights aren't being knocked out. People are ripping out the metal in them. That's nuts. So we're on this one, and we're going to try to work closely with the legislature on getting some improvements done to deal with the scrap metal issue.
Yeah, Governor, my name is Eric Mays, and I'm glad to see you here. It's like a vision. I believe that the governor was supposed to come to Flint in the situation we're in. You mentioned Tony Finney. When I graduated from Michigan State, I was roommates with, Michael Finney, Tony Finney's brother, if I'm not mistaken. Michigan State, the greatest school in the state. My question
I'm glad we got some people in blue here. I'm feeling okay then.
My question is this. When you mentioned the jobs piece, yesterday I met with the concerned pastors. Pastor Randolph is here, and I believe that the faith-based aspect of Flint can do a lot to help create jobs and train and educate people. I always advocate a model out of Grand Rapids. If you listen to me close, if it fits in anywhere and you know how to let it happen, the Amway model of entrepreneurship and home business, not necessarily saying those product lines, but bottled water is a good product line. It goes away, each week it runs out. That model we can do something with right away and teach entrepreneurship and Schedule Cs, and you're a Republican. Can you help us with that? And if you think it's a good idea to help the masses, help us implement that right away.
Well, I appreciate your question, and it's like, you can tell us stories about Mike later. And you got a great school, so that is true. But with respect to your question in particular, one thing we're also doing, and again, in the interest of time, I didn't go through that, but to encourage those kind of ideas, is one of the things the MEDC is also going to be doing is starting a new category for all the business plan competitions they're running. Not every single one, but what I asked them to do was to add a category for social entrepreneurship and for urban businesses. So we've got all these brilliant MSU students from all these universities going around doing these business plan competitions, and most of them are geared at regular businesses. Well, a lot of these kids really care, but there was no venue for them. So actually we're going to create a venue to say, come up with the enterprise on going to find a church, a neighborhood group, a school group, some entrepreneurs in the area that want to build a business plan, and let's have a business plan competition that could have some prize money or then tie into programs that then could help fund those businesses. Because let's just open this up and get those good ideas out in front of people. So this is, again, people helping people with some basic encouragement and clearinghouse. So those kind of very ideas, I think we're going to be able to get some of these programs, these competitions going even this year. So hopefully you got those ideas. We'll try to promote them and get them out in front of people and then have them become real.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for coming to our great city. I'm sorry, Mr. Governor. Thank you.
That's okay. That's still
I'm
one of the
looking at
nicer
my
things I
mayor.
get called.
That's okay. Thank you so much for coming to the city of Flint, which I consider one of the greatest cities this side of heaven. My name is Councilwoman Jackie Poplar, and I'm proud to represent the city of Flint. And I'm also proud to represent the 2nd Ward, which some are considering the highest crime ward in the city of Flint. But that's okay too, because with what you just said, we're going to take a handle on that. But my take today and my problem today seems to be the Liquor Control Commission. It needs to be revamped. Our city is run over with party stores that seem to not care about the masses of the people. They're the ones, not saying all of them, but I do believe, and this is my opinion, that 75% of the liquor stores in the city of Flint is contributing to the crime. Why do I say that? When you can walk in and you can buy a crack pipe. When you can walk in and buy 1 cigarette, which is against federal laws. And if you're well known, and if you're young, and if you're a black male, you can walk in and they'll get you a gun. How do I know this? Because I'm down in the trenches with the young people in the city of Flint. I get phone calls all the time about what's going on at what party store. So we in the city of Flint need for the liquor control commissioners to start taking a look at the liquor licenses that are being handed out. First of all, they need to change the laws and change some of the rules, because our city is functioning on when it was 200,000 people in the city of Flint. And that's why we have so many liquor stores and liquor licenses. You need to have them. And I'm asking, and I'm not only asking, I am begging. I have a constituent that was murdered Sunday night in a liquor store. One of my best constituents. One that cleaned up lots. One that did for the seniors. And he was just going to get some bread. It's not fair to our community. So I'm begging for you as the head of the state of Michigan to get a hold on what needs to be done. I thank you.
No, my condolences, Councilwoman. I mean, that's terrible. And these are numbers, these are people we're talking about. So I really appreciate what you said. We're already working, we've made some changes to the Liquor Control Commission. We're already in a process of doing that, but I'll actually ask them to come talk to you, to follow up on that, to get your thoughts, and to work with the mayor and his thoughts and the city council people, because that's important. And we're already, the other thing you mentioned that's tied into that, but a separate one, is we actually have a number of tobacco efforts we're working on already about the single cigarette thing. So these are all issues that part of it is getting us to understand the issues and figure out how to work together on these things. So thank you for sharing with us, and again, condolences on losing such a good person to your community, because it was a loss for all of us.
Governor, my name is Pat Clausen. I'm a legal investigator here in Genesee County. I have a question for you, sir. A lot of moving parts to this. One part I have not heard addressed is a problem that is an endemic problem in Genesee County and Flint and other cities in the state. How do you intend to deal with public corruption? The Michigan State Police Major Case Squad, which was in charge of investigating public corruption cases, was recently disbanded by your administration. I've heard nothing in your address about how you intend to deal with public corruption.
No, actually, there isn't anything in this specific message, because we're talking more on the violent crime front as the primary focus of this message, but public corruption is a terrible thing. I think you'll find, unfortunately and fortunately, we're very active in this state in terms of particularly the federal resources, and we know a lot of efforts are already going on. So there's a lot of law enforcement effort looking at public corruption in our state. Unfortunately, we've had too much of that happen in more recent history. And that's something that we do need to get cleaned up, because that's not a good thing for any of us. So there are resources focused on it, but it was not the topic of this. This was focused more on the violent crime issue. So I appreciate your input.
Good afternoon, Governor. Thank you for coming. I'm Bishop Bernadette Jefferson, a local clergy in our community who worked here. And my concern is you talked about the early release program from the prisoners, and we worked on it a couple of years ago, and then it just fell to the ground. My real concern is those that have records that never been in prison, not able to be employed. They were living off the state, and a few months ago, that income was cut off. So what are they to do? Because they need jobs, and with felonies on their record, they cannot get jobs, so what do they do?
Yeah, and actually the comments I made were about prisoner reentry, not early release, because we want to be very careful about the topic of early release. But as a practical matter, the main thing about changing the assistance programs is these assistance programs had gone on for years. That literally we had people 8-10 years getting assistance, and the real question was we weren't doing enough to help them get a job. Because the point of temporary assistance is temporary assistance even in the context of going for multiple years. It's not intended to be in perpetuity. And the real focus, and that's part of, you can see, hopefully our focus is to deal with the structurally unemployed. That's why one of the two largest single dollar amounts we're putting aside in this message are to help the structurally unemployed to be successful, the people that have not had a job, that weren't able to get a job because of either skills, something on their record, but to help them be successful. So I'm proud to say I think this is one of the first efforts that's taken place in a long time in our state or other states to put significant resources to really go after and understand if we're going to be a great state again, we can't leave people behind. We need to think about everyone in this state, and we need to be proactive about finding those people. And again, that ties into that whole philosophy, as I said, about asking our team and our resources to not just sit in an office, but to get them in a school, to see if a church would like to have someone come, where we can make that work out. How do we get our people on the front lines to interact with people? And that's one of the things I was proudest of last year. Even in our budget challenge, I want to give credit to the state police. We closed more than 50% of the posts of the state police last year. But we actually enhanced law enforcement because they were able to work out of their vehicles and get more troopers out into the public. Again, those are the kind of innovations and ideas that we want to be proactive on. We can't do everything overnight. But there clearly is a focus here to say, we're not going to walk away from the structural problems of the past. I'm proud to say that if you look at a lot of things we took on and we're still trying to take on, these problems have been there for decades. We're not backing off. We will take them on. Thank you. So I want to thank you very much for joining me today. It was important to have strong support for this public safety message. I encourage you to pass the word, to give us feedback on what you like, what you don't like. We've got good ideas and thoughts on how we may have some good ideas to intersect and to make them even better. So I encourage that. So let's take this out and let's remember, this doesn't matter what our own name tag says. This is about Michiganders helping one another. And that's exciting. So thank you so much.